Hey, good morning. Happy Monday. John with Empire Weather. Hope you guys are doing well. Had a wonderful Easter if you celebrate, and if not, had a wonderful weekend. We are here to provide the latest information on the agriculture belt, the forecast across the central United States as we move through the next week and then into late April. This pattern is going to go through a couple of fluctuations and changes, and important to kind of go through what's causing them, why we're so confident in them, and what we expect, how this pattern will evolve across the central United States. So first things first, through today, we're expecting dry conditions across the majority of the agriculture belt. However, there are parts of the belt that are going to be dealing with some isolated showers and storms. And that'll start here across parts of eastern Nebraska this morning. It's heading down southward into parts of Kansas later today, eastern Kansas. Again, this is really isolated showers, maybe a couple thunderstorms through the afternoon. We'll also watch for some additional shower and storm activity across Oklahoma later this afternoon and evening, with the possibility of some hail with those storms. Otherwise, though, we've talked at length about what's going on today across the belt, and we're going to back up nationally to look at what's happening. But we have an enormous ridge in the mid-levels of the atmosphere that's building across the Intermountain West, leading to a well-needed break across this region, our western ag regions of Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana. This will shift over to the east while our low latitude cutoff low, or basically a trough that forms underneath that ridge. So this is your process, right? It occurs like this. And watch this happen over the next couple of days. This is just fantastic for the agriculture belt, given our current situation for most of it, with this high pressure building in over the top of this cutoff low across the Gulf Coast, leading to not only warmer but drier conditions. And here are your temperature anomalies over the next couple of days. We see temperatures warming well above normal, essentially from the Intermountain West in the low-lying areas of eastern Wyoming and Montana eastward into the plains, where temperatures could average well above normal. If we look at exactly what these temperatures might actually be. Really, today, this is Monday afternoon, we see the temperatures warming up again. Overnight lows down into the 50s, 40s in parts of the Ohio Valley and the northern plains. But then by later Tuesday, we are up into the mid-70s, even 80s appearing in parts of the plains, and that warmth expanding well up into parts of the western belt as well. I touched on this last week, but this is the model feeding back on some snowpack up here. It will likely be warmer than this, still a little chillier than its surroundings, though. And then that warmth continues into midweek, right? We know we have our upper low on the Gulf Coast, but our warmth is expanding here further northward into the central plains and even into the upper Midwest. So by and large, this is a very nice week across a vast majority of the ag belt. And if we look at this from a precipitation standpoint, after our isolated storm complex heads southward today, it's dry and very dry across a large majority of the belt. Tuesday, Wednesday, here's Thursday morning is when we first start getting some more precip back. And again, you can see your moisture down here across the southern Gulf Coast states. Otherwise, the large majority of agriculture regions are dry, and the temperature departures remain impressively warm through essentially the later part of the work week here across the agriculture region. So the only thing that we're going to have to watch very closely from an impact perspective is this snowpack. We talked about the snowpack up here last week in the northern plains, and I want to go look at what exactly is happening there, because what we're seeing now is going to be a major reduction in the snow depth in this area. Here's where we are as of this morning. We see the deep snowpack across the Dakotas and northern Minnesota. But watch how rapidly this erodes over the next couple of days. By the time we get to Saturday, there is so little remaining compared to where we were across a large majority of this region. Even with some additional snow being modeled, that melts very quickly. And by the time we get to a week from today, the snowpack is very, very significantly reduced. All of that water, it goes without saying, has to go somewhere. And it's very likely that this runoff is going to cause some flooding issues, not only in the eastern Dakotas from the James River down into South Dakota, but also in northern Minnesota with that runoff into the Mississippi, down into parts of Iowa, as well. We talked last week about that river flooding outlook being a little bit concerning for this area, and I want to keep a close eye on this runoff and melting over the next couple of days with that warmth coming in. So that brings us to the middle part of next week. We have, or excuse me, late this week into the weekend, we have a storm system evolving. We talked about this window this week for the good conditions, the field work conditions, some planting can be getting done. But as we look towards the weekend, we do have a storm system that the models are suggesting is going to evolve across the central U.S. Generally, a relatively weak low-pressure area initially forms in the southern plains, but we have moisture surging northward, so some showers are possible across the northern plains Friday, and then we also get that moisture surging into parts of the Ohio Valley and the Mississippi Valley on Saturday. I don't think this is going to be a hugely impactful storm with widespread heavy rain or anything like that. But it will cause some disruptions. And in the western ag regions, we're going to see a cooler trend, the possibility of some additional snowfall. And then we'll watch to see if this system actually does wrap up across Minnesota, maybe northern Iowa, Wisconsin. This is a low confidence part of the forecast, but we could see some snowfall even this weekend in parts of these regions. So the long and short of it is, after a very warm and dry period this weekend, we're going to see another storm system produce some impactful weather that'll probably put a halt to some of the progress that we've been making with our processes, planting, and field work across these regions, in addition to the snowmelt problems. So that brings us to the early part of next week. We dry back out again, right? And the question that gets asked at this point is, where is the pattern heading for late April? I'm going to flip over to the ensembles, and I want to show you guys what's really happening here with this pattern and why we're confident that it's going to change. So here's the pattern that we're in this week. We talked about this. We have our big ridge coming over the top, our cutoff low stuck underneath. So it's warm and dry across a large majority of the belt. But what we start to see by next week, a week from today, is some momentum in the pattern. What I mean by that is things are moving from west to east, right? Initially, we are stuck in sort of this pattern here with our ridge and then our trough underneath. But watch the west coast, because what we start to see is west to east movement of this pattern right there. Your ridge comes in, and it slides quickly over to the east. Everything is starting to move and shake here as we get past the 15th. And temporarily, that'll lead to cooler conditions. The model suggests that we'll cool down around days 7 to 10 with this trough amplifying into the east. But notice how this ridge is not staying here. It is moving from west to east fairly quickly and ends up actually back in the central U.S. by the 20th. There's a reason for this, and it lies in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. So what we are looking at here is the MJO forecast, but in a different format. You're used to seeing the MJO on a graph in a circle. But what I'm showing you here is, here's South America. North America would be up here if you could see it. But this is the equatorial Pacific. And the MJO is convection, thunderstorm activity that moves from west to east across this region. And we can visualize this using dates here on the left side, and the green shows us convection, whereas the brown shows us sinking air subsidence, drier conditions. What this is telling us is that our convection is moving from west to east across the tropical Pacific as we move through the next couple days. In fact, right now there's quite an impressive convective event going on, and it's expected to continue to slide this way. So the MJO is very active at this. And if we look at the graphs that we're more used to seeing, all of a sudden now, after being quiet for several days, the models are saying, wait a second, we actually have convection ongoing. So our MJO is going to come back out with quite a bit of amplitude into phases 7, 8, 1, maybe even into phase 2. This is a very impressive event, and I want to show you guys what this forecast looked like just a couple of days ago. This MJO forecast a couple of days ago did not look as impressive as it does now. If we back this up, and actually zoom out a bit, that might help too. But if we back this up to where we were a couple days ago, here's the model forecast. There's really no signal here, right? And so we saw sort of this meddling signal for the MJO. All of a sudden, as we move through, now we look at the forecast today, and the models have a very impressive MJO event traversing the Pacific, emerging back out here actually in the Indian Ocean as well. So this is an impressive MJO signal, and the models are picking up on that. And so what we are seeing in the forecast is for momentum to come back in this pattern. Here's the tropical Pacific. We're looking at the northern Pacific Ocean, right? And I mentioned before the momentum in this pattern, right? This is a very blocked up sort of chilling pattern. There's really nothing going on. Everything's sort of hung up here. the momentum comes into the pattern suddenly after the 15th as we go towards the 20th. And one of the reasons for that is what we are seeing in the Pacific is this very long, extended Pacific jet signal. The Pacific jet is coming back, folks, and we see it signaled here. All of this momentum has to come into the United States at some point. This wave is going to unpack itself into the western United States. And when we look at where we stand from a sea surface temperature position even across the North Pacific, I'm going to back this up here so we can see equatorially where we're at. We continue to have these warm waters north of Hawaii. We continue to have cooler waters off the coast of the western U.S. and a very, very warm Gulf in southeast U.S. And so your overall pattern looks something like this. And again, when we go back to that Pacific jet and we see the latest European model and we roll those heights forward and we look at the upper level winds at the end of this run, this is a very impressive Pacific jet signal. And with that MJO propagation adding confidence, we can then confidently forecast a return to an active pattern in the U.S. And so here it comes. After the 20th of April, this trough comes in, the ridge amplifies, right? The trough comes down. We probably cool down for a couple days. But then as we get past the 20th, the models are showing the return of an active pattern. Here's all your vorticity in the southwest. We likely return to an active pattern in the western United States, and all this flow is pointed right at the plains, right? Here's your ridging in this general vicinity, and here's all your flow coming out. So this is where you're likely going to start to see a return to an active pattern. We'll probably warm up as well, but all of this flow, all this jet is coming into the western United States. You can even see it reflected here in the upper level winds. Here's your jet stream coming in back to the central U.S. And so to us, this looks like the return to an active pattern by the time we get past the 20th of April, and probably persisting into the first week of May as well, with this active southwesterly flow redeveloping across the central United States. So again, here are our highlights. We start off with dry and warm weather this week. We have a weekend storm system to track. We also want to watch that snow melt here across the northern plains for some flooding issues. And then we cool down temporarily, but as we move into late April, past the 20th and 25th, we get this southwesterly flow back. We have a very impressive Pacific jet being signaled, and it's likely that we return to active and warmer conditions across the belt at the end of April. If you guys have any questions, give us a shout. We'll be back with another video tomorrow morning. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful Monday. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.